few days ago, I woke up to the sound of Jethro, our son, counting out loud in his bedroom. There was a rapid flurry of numbers rhythmically tumbling out of his mouth in his own little sing-song way. Moments later, the counting stopped, and he came bursting in through the bedroom door. Pouncing onto the bed in excitement, he declared with great gusto and enthusiasm, "Dad, I counted to 1,000. I counted to 1,000. "That's great, mate. How did you do that?" I ask, defending my torso from his rapidly flailing knees and elbows. "I counted by tens," he said proudly. He was so chuffed with his new skill as he bounced about on the bed, absolutely beaming with delight. He could now track numbers all the way from 0 to 1,000 using his new superpower of counting by tens. Kids are mesmerized by numbers. The concept that numbers can stretch to thousands, millions, trillions, gigaplexes, and beyond is mind-blowing, and it seems to fill kids with a peculiar sense of delight. To Jed, his early morning counting practice is an endless source of enjoyment. No matter how well he counts or by what increments he's able to count by, there will always be more numbers to count. There'll be new patterns to discover. There's something alluring about the unattainable nature of counting as high as you can that provides an endless challenge to the developing mind. I think we can all relate to that moment in primary school when we ask the question, so numbers get really big, but what is the largest number that exists? And then at that moment, we're introduced to the concept of infinity. Infinity is the biggest number, is the common misconception many young minds take, myself included. And this becomes a hot topic for debate during recess and lunchtime for young philosophers as they chew their muesli bars and wait for their turn on the handball court. And I remember personally fervently defending my belief that infinity was a number, even to adults who knew better. Finally, when I'd accepted that infinity was not a number in itself, but simply to be without end, just when I thought I had this numbers thing figured out in late primary school, my worldview was shattered again. Not only could numbers get bigger and bigger, they could also get infinitely smaller. And a whole new set of negative numbers below zero was introduced. Then again, just when I thought I was getting the hang of whole numbers stretching infinitely in both directions above and below zero, the concept of infinite decimals between numbers was introduced. And so it goes. As mathematics becomes more and more complex, each time a new revelation opening up new realms for possibilities. Our worldview expands beyond previous limits until we finally fail engineering mathematics at the beginning of the second year. Or perhaps that was just me. It's little wonder then that when the ancient poets and prophets of the Old Testament are writing about God, their words like fingers pointing at the moon, the concept of the infinite is used in an attempt to describe what God and Spirit is like. In Psalm 147:5, it says, "Great is our Lord and great is his power. His wisdom is infinite." Infinite, limitless, without boundaries. The other term that gets thrown around a whole lot to describe the infinite wisdom of God is the Almighty. Not some mighty, Almighty is the term commonly used by Jesus. God's without beginning and without end. There's no starting point and no end point. So while the concept of an infinite God seems intoxicating and alluring to a child, as I know it was for me, inevitably as adults, for many of us, there's a point where we lose sight of the infinite nature of God and Spirit. There's a moment when we fail the second year engineering exam and we decide that this maths thing, it doesn't make sense and it's just not for me. How does this happen? Perhaps we learn concepts about what God is supposed to be that just don't hold true in the light of our experience. We may learn that God is only found in particular places with particular people and only manifests in particular ways, and good ways, of course. This identity of God inevitably falls apart with the loss of innocence. When we experience loss, death, illness, when we witness the dark side of life, when we experience the first dark night of the soul, this view of God just doesn't hold true anymore. With a limited view of who God is supposed to be, we inevitably face disillusionment and disappointment in light of our true life experience. How can a good, just God allow such terrible things to happen in our world? How can suffering be allowed if God is almighty, all-knowing, and all-powerful? If God is truly infinite, how can this be allowed to happen? The figures don't add up, so we end up throwing in the towel.